Hello, today we are talking about strategic prioritization of AI initiatives. This is something that was requested a couple times, so I'd like to go into this. What we're going to be talking about today is how to rank and prioritize different projects when you're doing your strategic planning for AI, for your transformation, or just for implementing projects and so forth. So we're going to be talking about the prioritization, like I said, but also constraints, how to assess different factors, how to quantify risks, projects and criteria so that you can select your projects and get rolling with them. So first things first, though, I would say let's make sure that we look at your goals and make sure that we're aligning projects to fit with those goals. So for a lot of people, it's going to be financial. And right now, I would say it's very common that most financial projects are about reducing costs. If you are looking to increase new revenue from new sources, then you might have an innovative goal. You're trying to differentiate your company. You're trying to expand out, branch out. Those are like increasing revenue sources, right? Minimizing risks could be also your incentive right now. It's a different kind of goal, objective. You might be worried that people are not knowing how to use AI or they're bypassing your AI systems to use AI on the side or whatever it might be. Or maybe you're focused more on resolving specific problems. So your criteria is the resolution of that problem rather than just ranking based on revenue generated, right? So different priority set. Culture, talent, this is like talent acquisition, but also talent retention. Maybe you're trying to attract top talent. And so you want to build projects that are going to make your company enticing and a place that people want to work, and that you're bringing in new exciting people coming in based on the new exciting things that you're doing. And then last, you might have a goal. This one I do pull separate because I do think it deserves it. But if you have knowledge in your business that needs to be democratized, meaning you've got information bottlenecks or problems with process, you're trying to improve the functioning of your business and create this long-term asset, this long-term value of your knowledge itself, then that might be your top priority. Okay, with that said, I think it is important to look at the basics first. I know that maybe for a lot of you, you want to just skip past this, but I do think it's important to consider this when you're prioritizing. So I do put some slides into this. So make sure you know where you're at, even if you're going to ignore the indicators. It's, that are telling you, whoa, slow down a little bit. But I would still figure out where you're at just so that you know you're doing it, eyes open, aware of where you're incurring some debt of moving too fast, so that later you know where you might want to go in to address those gaps and shortcomings. But also addressing some of these foundational things might actually be your quick win. This might be where you're going to see the quickest, fastest return on an AI project is starting with the basics. So, keep in mind that not all AI projects are just implementing something that's going to automate or be agentic or whatever. Sometimes it's more about governance. It's more about culture, change management topics, right? So make sure you're thinking about that. And then, be aware, just be aware of the consequences if you're moving too fast. So when you're looking at these domains, here are the 7 that I like to look at. So you're thinking about your strategy, how, what governance do you have in place? Do you have talent in-house for building these things? How good's your data? How good's your processes? Certain things like that. And then where is the culture at in your company? Are people AI forward or AI resistant or AI worried? So understanding those things is important. And there's a chain here because in the end, you're only as strong as your weakest link, your weakest component. And I think this, we're getting to a chart that shows that. So here's one more kind of intermediary way of thinking of this. So some businesses are still in the foundational level. They're learning how to prompt correctly, how AI even works, basic chat usage. Maybe you're at that next step, which is you're augmenting your services. So AI is helping you to do a job. So you might put some documents into AI, have a little bundle, maybe a little prompting is in there, a system prompt, a general instruction prompt is in there. You've made a custom GPT, and now you're able to use that to kind of augment your work. The next level up of maturity is that you now have data that's being integrated. AI is maybe doing some jobs, and it does it maybe for you. You review the output as the person, as the person who's the expert, and then you make adjustments to that, and then you release it. And then the last level is that the AI is doing jobs At this point, without your intervention, you're just overseeing that particular AI agentic system to make sure that it's still doing a good job by monitoring, right? So you're monitoring rather than part of the workflow anymore. Call that human on the loop instead of in the loop. So this is going back to those 5 levels. So if you look at this particular chart, for this organization, maybe governance here is kind of an area that is their weakest. And so as they go forward, here they have, good operational capabilities within their organization for AI. I would say to this organization, you probably want to address some basic levels of governance first before you keep going too fast, because otherwise you're putting your business at risk of IP being shared or private information shared and so forth. All right, so if you are still at that foundational level and maybe you're at level 1 across the whole board or 0, these are the things I would actually start with first where you're going to see the biggest impact. Make sure your leadership is educated. If you're the leaders, make sure that you are learning about AI so that you become literate with it, right? And then get that basic generative AI understanding of how it's working, get your basic governance in place, start capturing data. So start recording all your calls, start recording all of your meetings. Anywhere you're making data, if you're doing webinars, record them, right? Store all that data, just start doing it. You'll see later how you're going to use it. If you have processes that are all in people's head, I call it like tribal knowledge, make sure you're documenting that. Start writing SOPs, get someone in your business to start writing down those SOPs, right? And then if you have problems, I would also say, I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but first principles is really important with problems. If someone in your business is always short on time and you think, oh, I'm going to use AI to give them more time, I would slow down there as well for a second and look at what can you do right away that is going to help that person get more time in their lives, because some of those really quick options and solutions might not be sexy AI things. But it might be really impactful. For example, one company, I've seen someone who was really busy and they weren't batching their time. So they're getting lots of questions throughout the day. They're being highly distracted. They're getting questions from clients also coming in that they're after their webinars. And it's just this bombardment of Q&A that they have to constantly do, internal and external. Batch your time, right? Start getting all those questions, put them into a particular list, then focus once a day or twice a day at most to go through that list, answer everyone, and then go back to work, right? Something like that can immediately free up a few extra hours in the week. And then you can, of course, still go back and do some AI projects to then get even more free time. But, all this to just say, don't forget looking at your first principles. What are you trying to solve? Solve the problem. Don't try and use the fanciest hammer to screw in the nail, right? If the nail just needs to be screwed, use a screwdriver, not a hammer. Okay. And then I think this is the last slide on this kind of like preempt stuff before we get into the AI ranking. So if your organization is missing education, I think you can honestly stop here and just start with this because you're going to get big impact from this. So these are kind of a list of the things that I would say that you want to make sure that you're doing in terms of education. Also, this will help you with AI resistance or people in the organization who are afraid of AI for whatever reason. Education is really a multifaceted solution to all of that. So, okay, how do you evaluate projects? So 2 modes of thinking. First of all, you've got your quick wins approach where you're just looking to validate that AI is giving you benefits. You're trying to get some immediate returns from it. You're trying to prove to yourself or your board or whoever that AI is the real deal and it's going to provide value. That's your quick win approach. North Star, you're looking at something that is long-term and like you're trying to build a house and you're going to have a blueprint and then you're going to build room by room or, foundation up as you're working towards that ultimate outcome. The longer term approach with North Star, you're going to get more of a compounding value. You are going to reduce your risk scope if you have a North Star as well, because you're really building thoughtfully. But it's slower, right? You're not going to get necessarily that quick of a win, but you will have lower risks as you approach that. So understanding what is important to your organization, what your grit is important here, I think. And so as I already mentioned, picking a North Star gives you direction, incremental wins. It also can help you to be stronger, have a stronger differentiation because you're really building something that is of long-term consequence. And because you have essentially a vision of where you're going, you will also realize, I believe, that you're going to see easier change management with that as well, because that vision is really kind of helping to give everyone a common direction. So what is an example of a North Star? So here is one example. So two businesses we've been working with, they want to have ultimately this idea of an AI engineer, or it could be sales engineer, some kind of engineer. And so this AI system ultimately, could be a system that could help generate quotes for B2B solutions in their case. Maybe it doesn't need to be 100% accurate to be useful. Even 80% accurate is a huge time saver. Then the engineer who's using this assistant, this AI engineering assistant, doesn't have to do all of the grunt work to make that proposal, the engineering quote. They can just review essentially what the junior with the AI came up with, make fixes and changes and tweaks, teach the AI system also indirectly why it's still not getting 100%, right? That's important, that feedback loop. And that is like a huge potential here. This AI engineer could also answer questions, respond to requests, and it could also automate engineering tasks. So once you have this role, essentially you're talking about a role that is ultimately an AI role. And if you think about this AI engineer model here that we have of all these different things, you can break these down into separate little tiny projects, right? So answering questions could be its own little project, responding to requests, automating engineering tasks. So if you start building these little pieces up, you're moving towards getting that AI engineer in place, but you're doing it consequentially and sequentially. All right, so for quick wins, here is if you're the kind of person who just wants, like, give me the top 5 things to think about for AI projects today. I don't want to go further in this video. I just want, like, what are my quick 5? These are the top 5 things right now that are commonly having a high return, low time to invest, good return rates. So customer service automation, anything marketing and sales content related. There is a challenge there of getting the tone of voice matching and not to have slop, low quality AI content. However, I will say if your goal is to get SEO and GEO, meaning AI related search traffic, the quality of the content doesn't need to be as high. There's a whole other topic around that. But anyway, that is also an area of high return. Anything that has to do with internal knowledge or productivity, democratization and acceleration, administrative workflows, and then anything that's related to quality control, and that can also include inspection with AI-related inspection. These areas are generally pretty high returns. Some sources I cited below that to pull that all from, plus our own personal experience, my personal experience around this. So those are areas to look in for sure if you're trying to if you have a quick win approach mentality. So let's say you want to go beyond that, or you want to actually quantify for your specific business how to prioritize your projects. So first thing I would do before you start prioritizing is understand your constraints. Your constraints are what's going to determine what you're going to throw out, but also what are you going to have to break apart into smaller chunks. So figure out your maximum time and budget. If you have a project an idea that is going to take too long or cost too much, can you break it down into smaller chunks? And when you do that, of course, make sure that each smaller chunk still has some kind of an ROI target, a clear outcome, and so forth, right? So make these smaller chunks discrete and self-contained and having value. Understand your risk tolerance, how much risk is acceptable. If a project has 5% chance of total failure, is that something that's totally unacceptable, even if it maths out to be mathematically still a good project because of the 95% chance that it is successful has such a high upside, but maybe that would be too demoralizing to your business to have a 5% fail rate, right? Or maybe the project doesn't have a fail rate, but has a 10% chance that it's going to cost, I don't know, 20K more, right? Is that acceptable? Anyway, so understand your risk tolerance. Know if you have regulatory compliance limitations or needs. We had one client who ended up having really strong regulatory compliance needs when we were doing the discovery and planning phase for the project that we weren't told about right away. And then once we understood what they were, it ended up creating a project that was too large because we needed to do a lot of compliance and regulation as part of the project. And that's unfortunate because then you have to start either splitting it up or breaking the project down. So know that upfront, right? ROI minimums. If you have a certain amount of ROI that you need to achieve from the project to make it even worth your time. Do you have dependencies that you can't get away from that are something that's outside of your control that you're tied to? And then, of course, your organizational capacity. How many projects or things can you do at the same time? Maybe you're implementing these projects in-house, and so understanding your capacity to implement them is important from that perspective as well. All right, so when you're ranking them, make sure you understand how they fit your goal. That was that first slide of knowing if you know is your priority financial return, right? Or you're trying to solve problems, making sure it fits your constraints, understand the urgency of a particular project, and then how much effort it's going to take to implement it. What's the impact? My little triangle there is delta. That means time. So what's the impact in terms of time saved or money either earned or saved? And then what are some additional strategic factors that might tilt things? Strategic factors to me can be anything that's kind of hard to put in another bucket. That could be, for example, this project has a higher rank of importance because the HR department has said that this is really important to them. And we need to prioritize higher HR projects because of insert the blank reason within our organization, right? So there could be all kinds of strategic reasons that help to push up and down projects. So, in terms of ranking them, are we looking at a pain and we're solving the pain, or are we looking at opportunities? Those are more just ideas for differentiating the business. Make sure you're filtering them, breaking them apart. I think I've talked a lot about these already, so I'm going to skip forward. Now, when you're looking at the objectives and you're looking at your ideas, so here's 3 example ideas: marketing, content creation, customer service, and admin automation. If you know your priorities in those 6 domains that I talked about at the beginning of this presentation, you can then put those, and I would highly encourage you to make sure that if you're going to have more than one, that you do rank your priorities of your goals so that they're not 3 equal level priorities. Always have them prioritized in terms of a pecking order. So here we have, let's say financial is number 1. That's your most important priority. 2 is solving problems. 3 is reducing risks or getting rid of risks, right? So that could be the goal of what you're trying to do with these projects. So here, if we're using this criteria, we can see the customer service automation has both high financial potential return and also, or cost saves, and also is solving a problem that is a burning problem for your organization right now in terms of, this is things that people want to solve. It's maybe too much grunt work, it's annoying work, or it's too time consuming, whatever it might be. So in this case, customer service got high on those 2. So that would be an easy, quick way to know which project you should be looking at first. When you're picking your projects, make sure that you've got one problem with one job, right? Don't try and have an AI project that's doing multiple problem solves with multiple jobs. Make sure that you have either the logical framework or workflow defined or can define it. Make sure you've either got the data or you know how you're going to make the data that's going to support the project. Make sure you know what the technical limitations or problems might be technically and how you're either going to overcome them or, maybe they're acceptable. So these are just like additional things to think about. I have another video where I go really deep into this, so I'm just going to keep it high level here. Now, as you pick projects, I would say as a business, and the economy as a whole, and also your industry, there can be different oscillation moments between growth and optimization that kind of flow between the 2 states. So knowing where you're at is important. Right now, at the time of recording, I would say the entire economy right now is more in an optimization phase than a growth phase. When you're trying to do optimization, which is related to recessions, then you're trying to reduce costs, optimize time wasted, and so forth. You're focusing more on pain points than on differentiation, which is for booms. I'm not saying you shouldn't be investing into the booms, because once the recession ends, those that are going to be ahead are be the ones that we're thinking also about hitting that growth. But that's a whole other topic about recession planning related to economic planning and forecasting based on the business allocation of strategic level. But all I want to say here is do think about this. This can also help you to optimize what kind of projects you're thinking about if you're trying to get more of an optimization approach or more of a growth approach. When you're quantifying, so we're going to be so make sure you're talking to the stakeholders, the people who are involved. Make sure you get alignment of different people. If we're thinking that Bob is time constrained, make sure you talk to Bob and he agrees, right? Don't just hear it from other people. You're going to get a much easier buy-in and project if you've got alignment on the problems. And you can also bring to the surface underlying issues that might have nothing to do with the project that you need to address. So make sure you're doing that. Make sure you really state your assumptions so that you know that if you need to validate any high impact assumptions up front or as part of the project, we're going to quantify the solution in terms of its time, money, and benefits, and document the risks. Yeah. So, okay. So if you're optimizing one of the benefits of optimizing something, so this is, reducing time or money spent, is that most of the time you're going to be you're going to be automating something that you already understand really well. So this means it's going to be easier to document the processes. It's going to be higher chance of success. It's going to be a less complicated project. So whenever you're doing something that's a brand new thing, you're kind of innovating. I'll have a slide into that. So optimization is just generally easier, right? So these are kind of pain point ideas. This is an example where we might be looking at, we're going to be retrieving the time spent looking and organizing a document, or answering questions, or sales engineer has some follow-up emails we want to send, and we want to automate those. So you can quantify how much time you're saving. You can then turn that into a dollar amount. And then the percentage here is how much of their workload is reduced, because often it's not 100%. And then you can, from the time, you can always turn it into money. You can tilt it based on the strategic importance. And then it can be also good to think about the accuracy needed at this stage, because that can help you think about how complicated it's going to be. And then what are your assumptions? So this is an example of that. So for growth, here you're typically either putting in a new capability that you weren't doing before, or you're scaling something to a level that is new. And so that has its own challenges. As you're doing these growth related approaches, what you're typically looking at is some kind of validation, some positive feedback, because that's going to let you know that what you're doing is going in the right direction. So this could be, for example, a company that has never done its own marketing. It wants to do its own marketing content. Its goal is just to do GEO, SEO content. So it's not really aimed at the end user. It's more about getting in traffic and recommendations. Because it's something the company has never done before, I would consider it to be a growth rather than an optimization, right? So it has more risks. You don't have the expertise in-house of marketing, let's say. So how are you going to solve that? So, but it could also be you're adding AI features into a product or service you're already doing. Now, let's say you're doing automatic evaluations of the customer before that, you're giving them automatic diagnostics, let's say, through some kind of an online form questionnaire. AI is going to process it, give them some kind of an insight. That might be something you've never done, right? So every single time it's something you've never done before, there's a lot of opportunity there, but there's also a lot of risk. And so opportunities look very similar to the pain point analysis. You're not really looking at time saved because it's something new. You're looking more at benefits and the potential money that this could be pulling in. In the end, the money is important because it helps you to rank things, but this could be swapped out with whatever your other goal criteria was you're trying to rank things against. It still has assumptions and still has other things to be looking at. Okay, so risks. I want to talk more about this right now. These are just some categories and areas of risks to be thinking about. I'm going to do another presentation where I go much deeper into risks and also into calculations of projects to rank them at a much deeper level than this video. But this video is going to be way too long if I do that. So for now, I just want to keep it here. Look at these different categories of risks. There might be some more, but these are the ones that I try to think about, and map each of your ideas against these risks and try and qualify if these risks in these areas are high, medium, or low, because this will also help you to prioritize the projects. And so if you pull this all together, you end up with projects, the benefits that they have, the time saved if it's applicable, the dollars saved or potential money earned, the strategic importance, which is the tilt, what assumptions you have, and strategic importance, by the way, could also be related to your goals, right? And then what risks it has, you can add that on to this analysis as well. So for effort, this is the next thing that's important to pick your project priority. So in this video, we're just going to keep it at a kind of a high level system. I would say for each of your projects, these are the things that I try and look at to determine effort as a shorthand method. So really with a shorthand method, you're trying to find a quick way to rank ideas. But imagine you have like 20 ideas or 40 ideas out there. You're not going to want to spend 20 hours per idea to get all of the team involved to start coming up with time plan estimates for every single one of them before you decide which one you're going to do. That's just going to burn you out. It's also just unrealistic. So you need a quick way to be able to assess the effort. So what I would recommend is for each of your ideas, so here they are different ideas, look at these different areas and map them, and then figure out some way to rank the different ideas against these different criteria. And then you're going to weight your evaluation against some number system that you come up with, and then total it out. So for example, here, let me go through it. So if your accuracy needs to be more than 80%, Generally speaking, the more accurate the AI system needs to be, the more effort it's going to take. So if you only need 80%, when would you need only 80% would be if the AI is doing something to help you, but then the human still reviews the work and it's really just trying to speed them up. And the human who's looking at it can look at it and say, this is dumb, this is not right, this needs to be better. This is, but then, maybe 80% of it is awesome. And that's already helping them save hours and hours in their week. So if that's all you need, the effort is going to be way lower than if you need a 99% accuracy, right? So that you can see here this on this table that the high is going to have a, maybe less points earned if it's high than if it's low. It's, no, sorry, we're counting effort. So high would be more points, right? More points, more effort. If you need specialized data, then you need to create that data. And how much of the data do you already have that you can just pull together? Do you have a lot of data and it's in a data lake and you need to organize it? This could be a lot of work, but maybe it's not. So anyway, so I'm going to go faster through the list now just to kind of make sure we all understand what these different points mean. So data, right? Do you need to make data? Do you have data? Do you have the processes and logical framework for this role, for this function already defined, or do you need to create them from scratch, or are they in people's heads? Do you need to interview them? Multiple roles. So what I mean by this is, we're trying to keep the AI in one job, but even if we're doing that, there still might be some different roles that the AI needs to switch between. So map out the project and look at how many different functions does the AI need to do, maybe in a chain. And every single new role that the AI needs to do is going to keep increasing the effort, the complexity of the project. If you have risks, you want to make sure that you understand what those risk boundaries are and how much work you're going to have to do to mitigate those risks. Oh, I skipped the multimodal. So what I mean by multimodal is if you have a project, so here's an example where an AI system, so this is a project that we've quoted. So if you have a project that I'm thinking about, so if you have a project where you're quoting a system where it's going to do it's going to simulate first the mouse clicking through a website. So that's one job, one kind of mode that it's in. And then from that, it's going to download documents and store them somewhere. Okay, that's another mode switch. Now those documents are going to be OCR'd to read the text in them. Okay, that's another mode. Now we're going to take the data, and so every single one of these mode switches is adding complexity. Next, risk boundaries I already talked about. User adoption change. How easy or hard is it going to be for change management? Is it going to be something that people are dying to get in as fast as possible, or are we going to have to do training and support? Or do we have environment, security, compliance requirements? That's also going to add complexity, potentially a lot of effort. Every single API and integration that we want to do adds effort, so make sure you map those out. And then each of those APIs, are they already predefined? You have to write APIs from scratch, right? That would be a lot more work. And then if you have any prerequisites or dependencies that are outside the project that are going to add complexity as well, map those. All right, next slide. Impact calculation. So very similar, but now we're looking at the upside. So again, ranking, turning into metrics, turning it into quantifiable number, here, right, for the effort. Oh, I wrote effort here on the table. I meant to say impact, so I will fix that in the slide link. So how much money generated or time saved does it create? What problems are we solving? Is this project helping us innovate or differentiate? Is this going to help to increase company culture or to help retain and get new talent? Knowledge democratization. I think these are pretty self-explanatory. Does it fit my priority list highly? Does this project help us to lower risks, right? Rather than having risks, does it lower risks? Strategic factors outside of our control. Does it have a really good time to return? And emergent value, what I mean by this is, will this project help us to do other projects and has emergent value? So for example, a project that really nails down your tone of voice and your writing style for you, or your brand voice or whatever it is, doesn't just have immediate value for the project, but every single future project that needs to have a tone of voice component in it, like a little modular building block, will be able to access and reuse the results of this project. I would say that would have a very high emergent value and would help to tilt it to the top. When you put this all together, you divide the two by each other, you will end up with this graph, and it will be a linear graph, and you'll see things will plot along a line, but certain projects will have a higher return than the effort. That's these little green dots here, these at the top. And so those are the projects that you want to be looking at. And if your goal is to have things that are faster to get that return, you actually want to get the ones that are the lowest effort, that are above that bar. So that's how you do that. And then I would say in general for AI projects right now, I would aim to get your projects to have an ROI between 6 months to a year. I would try and minimize how many projects have an ROI over a year, especially for your first ones. If you are going to go bigger, I would really try and keep within the 2 years because things are changing too fast right now to try and do a 3 year. And then the NPV calculation, this is what I'll be doing in another video. But I would encourage you to do that kind of calculation as well, because I do think it's still beneficial to be thinking about the 3 year return on investment if you really want, especially if you've got like really large projects or big projects you want to put together. So we get all this information together. We're going to be trying to look now at prioritizing these projects. We now have added the impact effort into this chart, right, into this table. And let's say that you go through and you rank these projects 10, 20, 30, you have your budget set, your time, impact effort. So what I'm doing here really is just this is the more detailed way, what you might be doing internally. And then when you show it off to the rest of your team and or the board, upper management, whatever it might be, you might be looking at it more at this kind of abstracted level, right? Where you've decided your priorities and how much money you need and when you're going to be doing projects in what order. After that, you can just start putting in your roadmaps or put in your dates and so forth. And your status is good to track too. And ultimately, you might have some kind of a beautiful roadmap here. This has a 3-month, for example, time to get the first project out. You start measuring your ROI. And after that, you get a chain of projects coming out, one after the other, as you keep sequencing them. And you do your periodic reviews perhaps every 3 months to see how your roadmap planning is going, if you're going to be planning other projects in. That's it. So I hope this video wasn't too long. I hope it was helpful. If there's things I missed or you want me to talk about more, let me know. Otherwise, like I said, I am going to be releasing another video where I go a lot deeper into risk calculation and also ROI calculation that is a bit more mathy. But I think for some people that will be interesting. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. All right. Thank you so much. Don't forget to like, subscribe. That does help my channel. It's very new. If you like the videos, it'd be great to get other people to see them too. Okay, take care. Bye-bye. Have a great Thanksgiving.